Welcome back in to another edition of the Kings Pulse podcast, a Sacramento Kings podcast available on YouTube with some video to go with it as well, and on all audio listening platforms here, keeping your finger on the pulse of the Sacramento Kings. My name is Brenden Nunes, and got my good friend, coworker, co-host, all of the above. I'm going to come up with a better intro at some point here. Chris Watkins joining the show as well. What's up, Chris? How you been feeling, man?
Good, man. It's all good. It's still preseason for us all, so we got we got a couple weeks to figure it out, and so don't take anything that you're seeing or listening to right now too seriously, or don't factor it in too much into any long term things. It's all fake. It's all fugazi. It's all facade for right now. We'll really be ready to go in a couple weeks.
That was a good Doug Christie impression a little bit right there, because main thing we're going to be talking about today is Keegan Murray going down for the Sacramento Kings. Really one of the worst players that they could lose at any point in their season. I would argue that Domantas Sabonis and I guess maybe Dennis Schroeder, but more so Domas, are the two more irreplaceable players on the team aside from Keegan. But he had a left thumb injury in their second preseason game, the second quarter of that game against Portland. I don't know about everybody else watching, but I'd imagine they had a similar viewing experience to us. That was horrible. That was a really horrible way to watch a game. So don't exactly have a clip of how it happened. Players, coaches, and stuff didn't exactly know when. We haven't gotten clarity on it. It's one of those things where he tore a ligament in his left thumb. He's going to be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. And one of those things that, could have happened a couple plays prior to him even fully being aware of what was the extent of that injury here. But just found out on Sunday. Again, the timeline that the Kings gave us was, this is key here, reevaluation in approximately 4 to 6 weeks. So I would definitely emphasize the reevaluation part of that and the approximately part. There's a lot of wiggle room with this 4 to 6. I know it's easy to take that and just run with those numbers. And honestly, I'm kind of going to do that a little bit today with, just looking at the projection of how long he may be out. But that is a rough number. Again, reevaluation, you'll have to see how he feels. And of course, he's up for a contract extension with the deadline being October 20th. We'll get to that a lot later in the show, but you're going into a contract year. You're probably not necessarily in a rush. So we'll see how long it ends up taking. But Chris, just initial thoughts to the Kings losing Keegan, specifically with the lack of forward depth that they have on this team.
Yeah, like you said, it's really the one injury. It feels like, again, we can go back and forth on him or Sabonis, but it's the one that feels the most irreplaceable for this team. You asked me the first episode we recorded together, is Keegan Murray the most important player on this team? And I think a large part stemmed from there's just factually nobody else on the roster who is built like him, who is asked to do what he's asked to do, and frankly, who brings the skill set that he does. And so I think that's what makes this injury a little bit more catastrophic than others. I think you can kind of, especially in today's NBA, you can survive without Domantas Sabonis. I think if we do want to further have that conversation, bigs are more replaceable or more dime a dozen than ever, especially with what they're being asked to do, with the game being more perimeter centric and all that stuff. We can go on, but you could argue you can throw in Drew Eubanks for 30 minutes and he might get you 12 rebounds. He's obviously not going to get the assists and maybe the points that Sabonis can get you, but there's elements, much like Keegan, that you can fill. But it just feels like, again, the size that Keegan brings, the versatility of him being a forward, they have nobody. They have actually nobody that fills that gap. The Doug McDermott isn't doing the things that Keegan can do defensively. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum guys like Isaac Jones, guys like Dario Saric. You can throw Maxime Reynaud in there. They're just not nearly as mobile as Keegan. So it's devastating. To start the season, you really couldn't have a bigger hole in your lineup than what the Kings have. And, for the time frame sake of everything, I have it mapped out for about 10 to 17 games based off of where it fits in the 4 to 6 week evaluation process. November 9th would be 4 weeks. November 23rd would be 17 weeks. We'll get more into the nitty gritty of the game by game of it all, but they can survive for a little bit without Keegan, but if it's going to be more on the longer end of things, more towards the 15 to 17 game mark, you're starting to talk about a quarter of your season and pretty much the entire beginning momentum of your season being thrown down the drain. And we've already talked about how fragile this season is going to be from just a player movement standpoint. Feels like if Keegan is going to be more on that 6 week time frame, like we can kind of already get a guess as to how this entire season's going to go.
Yeah, unfortunately, we talked about heading into preseason, what are the positional battles we're watching? And I think that backup four was definitely one of them. And then you go to that backup point guard spot, but you specifically like that backup four because they don't have anything else like Keegan. We've said time and time again, like they kind of need another Keegan. And now they lost the
we've
one that
argued
they
Keegan's
had.
not even really a four, right? Like Keegan's only playing that spot because of the fact that they don't have anybody else. Like they literally have nobody else. So it's funny that or I guess just again more revealing that and a guy that they were already playing at that spot of necessity, like now they have nobody in both of the 3 and the 4 spots.
For sure. And it's actually one of the first things I want to ask you a little bit here, because I think what I've heard a lot of people say as my cat is whining at the door. I don't know if you can hear
It's
that at
fine.
all.
I'm sure mine
Um,
will join soon.
yeah, there you go. And I just think that I've seen people having the conversation of, hey, this is why they should have had more forward depth, because this was always a possibility. You never know what's going to happen throughout the course of a season. Anybody could go down. Um, and I'll just start by sharing my thought on it.
Please.
And it's not the most optimistic, just that it already felt like this year and potentially next year, but that's TBD. You got to see how this one plays out. They're kind of waiting things out, right? They're waiting for eventually to rework the top of this roster, and there's no quick avenue to necessarily be doing that. So point being, like, sure, you could have gone and like maybe made a more compelling argument to Trey Lyles, for example, and maybe he could have stayed or something like that. But for the most part, I don't think that they wanted to commit much to something in that spot, and they didn't have much financial flexibility. Like, could you have gotten something better than Dario Saric back in return for Jonas Valanciunas? That's probably the one I would try to pick apart a little bit, but that wasn't a trade for the sake of Dario Saric. That's to clear up money in order to bring in Dennis Schroeder. So I get why people are like, hey, this is why you needed more forward depth. I'm not super mad about it, though, personally, because I just kind of think that, again, it's all relative to what your expectations are coming into this year. And I guess I was already coming in with the mindset of you're just trying to see what you got this year. And I don't know that they're trying to make everything fit perfectly right away. They're trying to work towards an identity that this current roster doesn't even really have when it comes to their personnel, to be honest. So while it's something that I get the criticism a little bit, I'm kind of willing to give it a little bit of a pass, I guess, because of my expectations for what I thought this year was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just really a question of like, give me the name. Like, give me the name of the
Right.
person that the Kings should have gone out and gotten in free agency specifically. And then, to your larger point about the Valanciunas thing, give me a name that also makes sense with the other moves that they also, again, they had to bring in a starting caliber point guard to this roster. We can argue back and forth on if Dennis Schroeder was that perfect piece, if there's better options there, but they had to allocate that money towards a starting point guard. I just don't know who the small forward or the forward in general, the versatile forward that everybody is looking for was going to be available, especially at the price point in which the Kings could have paid. Now, we can maybe have conversations, like you said, like, is there a longer term vision for this team that hopefully does include more forward depth? I would hope so. Again, I'll echo Scott Perry's prudent and opportunistic thing. Like, they've already been in early discussions of Kelly Oubre potentially being upset in Philadelphia early this offseason. Obviously, our entire summer was consumed by Jonathan Kuminga talk. So I think, to your greater point, like, there's a vision for this team that I think isn't quite even like I mean, obviously it's not hatched yet. I don't even know if it's in the egg form yet. It feels like they're aware, at least, which is the first step in all of this, is at least acknowledgement that there is a problem, and they're clearly at least taking steps in the right direction of trying to address it. I think it's just, hey man, like, how can I can for 9 minutes, like, shit happens sometimes. Like, I think that's what this is. This is super unfortunate for the Kings that to start the season, your probably biggest weak point, which is forward depth, is just being directly reflected right at you in probably the worst way possible to say, you did not address this and it's going to be a massive problem. Like, yeah, it's we like you said, we've known it's a flawed roster. It's just this is a very, very, very unfortunate injury to happen right at the start of the season to kind of set the tone.
Yeah, I think, I guess sort of a better way to say what I was saying is that I just don't think they should have expended assets in order to clean up their forward depth when really what are we doing this year in the first place? You know, like John Collins, who people will point to, he's making upwards of 20 million. It's an expiring contract. There's a guy like, sure, is there a world you could have went and done that? It's not very
Sure.
easy.
Yeah.
That's a tough salary point for the Kings in order to meet, right? And you have to give up additional assets for 1 year of like John Collins isn't putting you in that next tier to the point of the tiers that we did
Right.
the other day, you know? But now what they're dealing with is
Right.
not only from a watchability standpoint, by the way, like I thought Keegan was one of the key things to keep tabs on this season, his aggressiveness and what that may look like for his future. But who the hell fills in the meantime? And I think that's what we're going to spend a good bit doing right now. First, I want to get to Doug Christie a little bit, talking about how
Yeah.
he plans to approach this time that they have of 2 more preseason games, and I believe it's 6 days on the day of recording until the regular season kicks off. Bring out that starting group. Do you hope to have consistency with who's out there, or do you think it could be situational based on the match?
Definitely. I think it's going to be, maybe matchup based and different things that we got to think. But more than anything, it's not really about who starts, it's about who finishes. So understanding that from night to night, there might be matchups that are beneficial to us, and we're going to look at all of them.
Yeah, Doug also said, yeah, right there, just mentioned that he thinks it could be night to night what this starting lineup looks like. The day prior, he mentioned that this is a trial period right now. Essentially, we're going to try different guys out in that spot and see what it looks like. When we got into Sunday's practice, rookie Maxime Reynaud was wearing that starter black penny, and DeMar said that he was running with that group. And people won't love this, but that's a very Mike Brown thing to do, right? Hey, I'm going to take a third stringer and put him in there, so that way my second unit stays the same as well. But that's just a practice thing. Like your thing you said at the beginning, me mentioning it was very Doug Christie. It's because Doug is saying, hey, don't read into what you're seeing right now, right? This is a trial period, essentially. And you don't love that there's necessarily that going on right now. But as you said, shit happens. This is the hand that they are currently dealing with. And I guess first direction I want to go with you, Chris, is if you're Christie here, who's the first guy you're trying? Who are you starting in their next game against the Clippers? What direction would you like to experiment and see, hey, does this work first?
I don't know if I would, for the sake of keeping the conversation easy, I was going to say I don't know if I would try this in the next game because honestly, I don't know if I would want to reveal it until I am actually willing to roll it out. But for the spirit of your question, I think this is your answer too, because it's something you've been promoting more so one side of it, not necessarily the other side of it that I'll promote more, is Keon Ellis entering the starting lineup and ipso facto DeMar DeRozan moving to the 4. Is it something that I think is going to work? No. But I just think that there's a world where DeMar DeRozan at 6'7" and like a little bit stronger, obviously kind of has that old man strength as well. Like I think there's a world where he could figure it out for, again, we're talking 10 to 15 games, maybe again, his game offensively as well is a little bit of a bigger man game, a little bit more, inside the arc centric. I don't know. It's something that makes a little bit as much sense as anything else to me with all of this. I don't think there's any clear answer. I think there's problems with literally every single option we can go down, but the one that you could directly point to DeMar DeRozan getting absolutely flamed by Aaron Gordon last year, and the only instance in which I can remember them specifically putting DeMar at the 4. Defensively, it was just a nightmare. I mean, it was Aaron Gordon at the rim, lob after lob after lob, and he just couldn't stay in front of him. So I could see how instantly it could be a problem, but it's the only guy really that I feel like body wise and frankly, I mean IQ wise, I think could figure it out in the time being.
Played with the starters a lot, even though it's not Dennis, talking about Keon. I do think that's a guy that very much should get consideration. I think it's easy for people to be like, hey, a forward went out. It's got to be a forward that slides in. I think you could slide DeMar down. I think we were already going to see a lot of small units, maybe not starters specifically, with this Kings team. It's just the makeup of their roster and the personnel that they have going on.
So, two questions for you, real quick. When you've been promoted, because and please correct, like you have been saying Keon Ellis, or at least that should be something that should be more thrown into it.
Yeah,
perfect. Were you considering DeMar at the 4 when inserting Keon into the starting lineup?
Definitely. I mean, again, I just don't know that there's better options. Like, is DeMar guarding 4s worse than Dario Saric is? You know, I don't
That's
really
a great
think
question,
so.
right.
Is DeMar, like when it's DeMar and say it's Neek out there, who is the one that you're putting on Rui Hachimura? Who are you putting on Julius Randle? Like, it might be the strength of DeMar, you know,
that's what I'm thinking.
Literal strength, not necessarily like a strength of his game, just to be clear. But you know, slower foot speed at this point in his career. Like, I already had the thought even before Keegan went down that DeMar just might be the backup 4 on this team. You know, like I haven't been convinced about what Isaac looks like there. And I just think that strength can play into that. Like, if it's don't get me wrong, I think about that Aaron Gordon Nuggets game too, where he's getting back cut and that doesn't look good. I worry about Julius Randle. I just don't know what your other options are.
Yeah.
And if your identity is this 94 feet thing, and you're like, Keon just fits so seamlessly into a starting group. We've seen what that looks like, you know, and there's a lot of lineups, and we're going to go down the line a little bit because I think a good exercise is kind of, hey, you're playing this team, who would you go? There's a lot of teams around the NBA where I think it does make sense that their 4 isn't what you typically think of for a 4, you know? So I do think that Keon is a guy that at very least should get a lot of consideration on certain nights, you know, and maybe we can even start with that Lakers preseason game, for example, or, you know, we don't know who they're actually.
We can do the regular season because the Lakers is a 3rd regular season game anyway.
That's fine. That's fine. Do you want to go down the line now, but like team by team, and we can have the conversation that way, or is there someone else you want to talk about prior?
No, I mean, we can throw out the options just so that it's all on the table. So I mean, I see if we're gonna do a tier list, I guess, if you will, of the options. I think, you know, Keon Ellis, again, a guy who has starting experience, moving into that starting lineup, and like you said, him kind of being a Doug Christie player, does make the most sense. So I would put that as the top option. I think a lot of people, in terms of noise, a lot of people have been clamoring for Neek at the 4. I think that's at least something that we should throw in there, and maybe even if we don't feel like it is a good option, at least exploring the option. And then it's the obvious ones, or I say the quote-unquote obvious ones, the ones that seem to make the most sense. Dario Saric, Isaac Jones, Maxime Reynaud, one of those guys getting the nod.
No Doug McDermott love. The guy that hasn't.
I just don't think so. Yet. I just don't think so. I mean, like, we saw him randomly get thrown into shit last year in a similar fashion of this, but I just don't think so. I mean, yeah, like you said, I mean, we haven't even seen him in the preseason, and he just doesn't, you know, offensively, yeah, sure, maybe he does what you want Keegan to do, but defensively, it's just not even remotely close.
I think Doug is very much a break glass in case of emergency. And until we see otherwise, I'm honestly thinking Dario in the same light. But we can go through this as team by team, right? Because again, like the clip we played, I think Doug mentioned this is probably going to be situational. And I think that makes sense on the best way to go about this. First team that they are up against is the Phoenix Suns on the road, right? And correct me if you've seen something different, but I just kind of looked at what I think projected starting lineups are. But for Phoenix, a little interesting, but Devin Booker at the 1, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Ryan Dunn, and Mark Williams. Not a very big lineup. Yep.
That's pretty much what they've been running all preseason. I was looking at their preseason lineup. No Mark Williams in the preseason. They've been running, I can't pronounce his last name, Adenaho or something like that. Yeah, he's been starting at their center spot. But yeah, I mean, overall, the greater point is, from everything I saw, Ryan Dunn and Dylan Brooks are pretty much their 4s, and both of those guys are listed at 6'6".
So here you have 2 spots where you can kind of hide guys, right? With Dylan Brooks and Ryan Dunn. And depending on how you feel about Jalen Green, but I want to say there was actually a first half in Sacramento where he lit them up last year.
Yeah, he went crazy.
And both of the games. I want to say he went crazy in the first half and then had like single digits in that second half after they switched things up. But to me, this very much feels like a Keon game. Like you can put DeMar and Zach on Dylan Brooks and Ryan Dunn, and having that guard defense of Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. Like Keon is a great guy to put on Devin Booker or Jalen Green here.
Yep. 100%. I mean, we've seen it before. That's like the Devin Booker is the exact kind of guy that Keon is perfect for guarding. Like we kind of saw in that first season where he was really thrown into the fire. Like they went all across the board to see what is the limit with Keon Ellis guarding. And I think Devin Booker's like that perfect sweet spot. Now, if you're going to ask him, obviously, to guard like the Giannis, KDs, Paul Georges of the world, that might be where we start to reach the upper limitations. But I think a 6'6", ball dominant, off the dribble guy like Devin Booker is exactly who you would want Keon guarding and just making his life hell for however long he's on the court.
Yeah, I mean, if they went in another direction, like say they went Neek, do you think that still works here as well? I guess then you're putting Neek on. It'd be a similar
just game
matchup.
One, bro. That's crazy. You're the first game of your NBA career. I think this is where maybe Doug, being an ex-player, I think a lot of coaches probably aren't trusting rookies anyway, but I think knowing what that feels like, I just can't imagine Doug throwing Neek that that would be a real compliment to where they feel Neek is at, but that's pretty crazy saying game one, either go guard Devin Booker or Jalen Green. That feels a little bit like you're asking for failure, especially, at least in that first rotation, especially.
Yeah, that is a lot going on. For what it's worth, Neek is the one that started the second half of the first preseason game when Zach wasn't playing. He started the second half of that Portland game when Keegan wasn't out there anymore after his injury. So I do think he's probably one of the leading candidates here, but definitely agree with you. I mean, very, very legit first game of your NBA career. Hey, go guard Devin Booker or Jalen Green. Like, probably not the greatest setup. Utah right after that, which I think is a little bit of a good different looking lineup, right?
Yeah.
And what lineup do you have? Because I've seen multiple, and there's some with a whole lot of size.
I went, how I pretty much did it was just looking at what they run in preseason and trying to make some adjustments from there. It's a little bit tough with Utah because we don't really know who's going to be healthy game one for them. Like, is Lauri Markkanen? I assume he's going to be playing game one, but, just with where he's at with his whole situation, I don't know if he has any sort of injury.
Let's put him in there.
Okay, so for the sake of it, we'll live in a perfect world. You can have Ace Bailey in there, you can have Taylor Hendricks in there, but of course you're going to have Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler in there. Ace Bailey's listed at 6'10", so if we want to have Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, that's 2 7-footers and a 6'10" guy out at the small forward. That's a problem even if Keegan's out there. If we want to say, Walker Kessler or Lauri Markkanen's not out there, Taylor Hendricks is listed at 6'9". I was just looking at their bench their bench rotation: 6'8" Kevin Love, 6'9" Kyle Anderson, 6'7" Cody Williams, 6'11" Kyle Flipkowski. And then, Yusuf Nurkic, 7-footer, Taylor Hendricks, 6'9". Like, this is going to be, I thought this was going to be an easy home opener. Looking at the height, especially if Utah can take advantage, that's a really, really, really bad matchup for the Kings, especially now.
They are a big-ass lineup. This is the most Danny Ainge. Like, it's starting to look like a Danny Ainge team. Let's just get all the size, versatility that we can. And they're taking flyers right now. Again, when we did our tiers, like, they are 2 tiers below everybody else in the Western Conference, to be honest. And I'm not expecting a lot. But that is a tough matchup. What if Lauri's out there, and
it's early in the season too, where all these guys have all the faith in the world too. If you're the Kings, like, you're not getting them 3 weeks in when the reality of the season is already set in. You're getting them game 2, potentially their first road game, feeling like, hey, let's go shock the world. Everyone thinks we're going to suck. We might compete for a play-in.
In Utah, the last couple years, I don't remember last year, but I remember the year prior, they were like up there, 20
Will Hardy, come on,
into the season. Yeah, Will Hardy, little coach of the year in his rookie year campaign, didn't end up getting it, but a little bit of a push for that. That's a great point. This team could look solid. Is there the only other option we haven't talked about, I guess, and I think that we're on the same page with this, but just to discuss it, is double bigs. Like if Domas were to slide to the 4, or if you're playing Drew Eubanks, like Drew, I feel like I've heard mentioned as well. I'm with you. I can't do it. I can't get there.
No, I mean, there's no spacing offensively at that point. DeMar's not a shooter. Dennis is barely a shooter.
Hey.
And yeah, that's crazy. And then to have Eubanks and Sabonis out there as well. So to essentially have Zach as your only legitimate shooter, I mean, that's offensive suicide. And again, as we've talked about with this defensive orientation that they want, that's not as if, usually if you're going to roll out a terrible offensive lineup, you better at least have, Jonathan Isaacs out there or something like that. They have no defensive backing to lean on at that point. So I don't really know what the strength of a Sabonis at the 4 would be. And even then, I still feel like Sabonis is more so playing center in a lineup with really any of their guys. Like in what world is Sabonis doing more of the 4-man work in any of their lineups? I mean, we've even talked about before, you specifically talked with the Stanford coach who had coached Isaac Jones as well. And even he said like Maxime plays way more of a 4 game than a 5 game, and said the inverse about Isaac Jones. And so again, I just don't know unless the answer is Isaac Jones. That's really the only world in which I see Sabonis maybe doing more of the 4 stuff. And then even then, I think ideally Isaac Jones is that guy. So I just don't, I don't know. I've never seen it. I definitely don't see it now.
Same. I'm all in on Domas as a 5. I think that's where he gets his offensive advantages as well. Like he's not out there for defense, and he's out there to help run the offense, and they're repositioning him specifically for the sake of where the opposing big is going to be throughout the course of this year, trying to pull him further from the basket. I mean, the 4s are going to be out there on you. Like, and I just don't think that it is conducive to helping their offense, which I know that they're a defense focused team. Doug said, hey, this is going to be about defense, not just throwing everything else out the window, but like reality, they have to make their money on offense this year. They were 22nd on defense last year. I know they have high hopes, but like this has to be an offensive team. Like I think that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. So if you're talking about a front court of, let's say it's Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, who do you start if you're Doug in place of Keegan? Because this is not a Keon game.
I don't know. I mean, this is where there's not a good answer. I mean, I guess, and it's game 2, so it's too early in my opinion. We just did the thing with Nick Clifford. I can't then go and say start 7-foot Maxime Reynaud in game 2 of his NBA career, the 2nd round draft pick. So, I guess you go Saric. I mean, I don't think there's a good answer, and it's where maybe you take the opposite route and say they have to play against us, and maybe again your answer is to go small just to counteract everything that they do, because they're, no matter what you do, you're never going to be bigger than them, and so you might as well play into some of the strengths of being smaller. And I think that was already, again, from a roster building standpoint, like that was already kind of how they were built to play. Maybe you just, again, lean more into guards.
Does Malik come in the conversation at all? To me, I mean, yeah, it would be sacrificing a lot of your, as my mic just attacks me, it'd be sacrificing a lot of your bench scoring, obviously, but in you're fully leaning into offense. I don't think that's what Doug wants to do. That's where, like, when Doug says it's who's closing the game that matters, in my mind, that's where, like, maybe Malik is in the closing lineup here in place of Keegan. And like, it's still going to be tough to see what that looks like, but there's nights where Malik has played himself into that. For the starters, though, against Utah, I think it has to be Neek. Like, unless you feel good about Dario or what Isaac have showed you, I know it's really early in Neek's career, but I just don't think there are better options. I think that he does still give you versatility, fits in well with the starters. It's very TBD, but I'll tell you right now, my answer is never going to be Dario Saric in these things.
Correct.
I just don't. I haven't seen it. He didn't play last year on a team that needed depth at that position, and to me, that's telling. And we didn't see him in the whole first preseason game, for whatever that's worth, but not even getting on the floor is pretty telling to me, I would say. And actually played pretty solid in that second one from what we were able to witness. Like, offensively was rolling.
I think he had 14 points.
Yeah, I think he was 4 of 4 from 3 or 3 of 3. So there's a little bit of that there, and I could totally be wrong. They could go in the Dario direction, and I could see the logic. I don't have that much faith in what we've seen from Dario the last few years. I guess the minimal amount that we even have, that I just don't know that I would ever feel comfortable with him being my option. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be flaws to pick apart in any of these answers. So I would probably go Neek between the two, just a little bit more size. And hey, at least you're guarding another rookie if it's Ace Bailey out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is the size difference, right? I mean, if we're just going off of listed height, Neek is listed at 6'5", and you're going against a guy who's 6'10". So you're talking about giving up 5 inches of just height. Who knows wingspan difference and all that as well. I do think, yeah, I mean, right. I guess you're kind of, again, you're already at a disadvantage, and that's where I just don't see the point in trying to go man for man and try and match everything. I think you just really have to play your own game plan. And you kind of got my wheels spinning about the finishing thing. I know it's obviously the thing we should be thinking about, but I think you're right. I think in terms of the closing lineup, it's just going to be a variance of Malik and Keon Ellis, and I think that's really the answer to all of this. Is there's no way we can the same conversation we have about Neek and Maxime starting definitely applies to finishing the game as well. There's just no way that I can see Doug trusting 2 rookies to finish games early in the season, and for that reason, it just feels like Malik and Keon are realistically the only 2 guys off the bench that I could realistically see entering that 5 rotation. And so it kind of feels like DeMar at the 4 is actually going to be what the answer is.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll see how much, if Lauri's out there, is Lauri just shooting over DeMar? Like,
I think that's what it, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. There's no other bet. Like, I don't know who else is guarding. Dario's not guarding him. Maybe Isaac. Maybe this is an Isaac scenario, but like, putting Isaac Jones on the market is a tough one. That is a tough one. Yeah, I mean, this is the scenario this is the issue they're running into without Keegan, essentially. And this is one of the matchups that I think would show it the most.
Well, and couldn't you also argue that this is the crux of the problem of not having an identity too, is that you don't have anything to lean into? Like, I would like to say again, like, hey, it doesn't matter if they run 3 7-footers out there. We are going to run what we run, and they have to try and stop what we run. I think the problem is the Kings, at least as of this moment, we don't necessarily know what it is that they feel like they can lean into. What is their strength? What is their identity? What is the thing that's, Malik infamously after that Clipper game, the double OT game, was like, hey, like they, I'm sick and tired of talking about who we play next. Like, they got to play us. Like, at what point is it, hey, they have to adjust to what we do as well? And I don't know. It just feels like the Kings would be playing defensive or on the defensive side of things if they're out here thinking, we'll just move on to the Lakers. Like, the Lakers have Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, DeAndre Ayton, Jake LaRavia. By the way, how much could the Kings use a guy like Jake LaRavia right now? But what are you going to do? Again, you can't, if you're going to just say, hey, Vando and Rui and LaRavia, like, we have to throw out Dario's. I don't know. To me, I don't like the idea of them catering on a game-by-game basis. At some point, they have to say, this is what our game plan is. This is what we're trying to do on a nightly basis. And these are the guys that we feel like best help us execute it. It feels like if you're throwing in Dario Saric one night and then Maxime and then IJ the next, like, you're just never going to get any sort of consistent play style.
Yeah. I mean, I think if they were catering to the style that they are pitching and the identity that they want, right? This 94 feet thing, which I want to dive more into, like, after we see a little bit more of this, because it's been a very weird scenario and like how some people are talking about it and stuff, but that will be another episode. If they are leaning into that and the pace spacing, I think Keon's the answer, right? And that's your 94 feet defender. Yeah. And like, if we're just saying regardless of matchup, I would say that I think Keon, I guess, probably plays into that. And like, we didn't mention Devin Carter, I think probably for good reason, but I guess Devin plays into that. If you really cared about keeping that second unit the same, and we're going to go full Mike Brown here, like, let's pull somebody up from the third unit, I would be surprised if that's the way that this was handled. But I think Keon probably plays into it most. And like, yeah, Lakers scenario, again, I'm probably going Keon. Like if we're no LeBron, right? If we're talking Rui, Vando, and DeAndre Ayton, then I'm not really worried about Rui and Vando, to be honest. Like I'm putting Zach on Vando probably, and I'm probably putting DeMar on Rui. Again, I think that's one of those fours, by the way, that I'm like, that's probably solid for DeMar. And it, like, don't get me wrong, it's not great. There's no matchup where he's locking somebody up, but I think that's the type of guy. He's not that quick. He's more of a strength guy. I think DeMar can battle with him, and DeMar's smart out there, obviously. But then Keon can be the one checking Austin Reeves. I don't know. I mean, there's the Luka aspect of this team that is just going to be a problem for freaking anybody. Right. But like, this is probably another Keon one for me because they're specifically Lakers forward depth without LeBron. I'm not all that worried about it. And that's where I feel even more comfortable. Like, hey, Zach and DeMar, you got that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not concerned by it. And ultimately, I think it's a game where you should. I think the bigger thing is finding matchups where you're going to be in trouble because of the size disadvantage. And I think ultimately the Lakers aren't a team where, especially with DeAndre Ayton being their main center, like I just don't really think their dominating size is going to be the thing that bothers you this year.
Dominating?
No, I hate that so much. I hate
great.
It so much.
The tattoo is good for a chuckle for sure. Let's go quick through these next three because you haven't seen the back tattoo. It's like the chosen one Braun tattoo. It says dominating across his entire top of his back. You have to check it out. It's great.
That's crazy.
It's great. This is also pretty early in his career. I want to go through these next three fairly quickly and just get your thought on who you would go. Right? OKC. SGA, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and then you struggle with Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein. Yep. Obviously, a lot of size on this team. Where would you go?
I said Chet's really the only size problem that you have to think about. Like in terms of, again, like max height, I think they can go guard heavy because to me, like the Jalen Williams and things like that, like 6'7", Lou Dort, the Cason Wallace, like the SGA, this team, Alex Caruso, all these guys are mainly guards. Like their biggest problems are the guards, and if you want to throw Jay Will as a forward, right. I think you should be fine in this one going all small. But this is this is why Chet Holmgren is the problem that he is, though, is because he's 7 feet and he causes such a matchup problem. So, again, if you want to play defensive matchups, this is an interesting Maxime matchup, him and Chet. But ultimately, again, I don't think they throw him into the fire this early. And so I think they're okay going small.
Yeah, you have the, I guess, cop-out sort of that anybody can guard Lou Dort, right? Right. I worry about Jalen Williams though, and that's why I might go Neek. That's very much where like Keegan would be.
Maybe you can throw Zach LaVine out there. Zach LaVine at some point, Doug's hyped up his defense quite a bit. We can't forget Zach LaVine. I mean, you shouldn't forget Zach LaVine is a ridiculous athlete. Like at some point here, matchup for matchup, like you should be able to guard a dude like Jalen Williams, at least stay in front of him a little bit.
For sure. I think that's fair. I think that's what you're going to have to do in this sort of scenario, right? And DeMar, you can guard Lou Dort, right? And we can roll Dennis out there, obviously with SGA, or maybe it's Keon. I don't know. I guess
someone's got to guard Chet. I mean,
I don't know about DeMar or Zach there. This probably is not a Keon one for me.
Maybe again, this is where Saric gets the nod just to get a hand up on Chet, but this is where my answer would be. I just don't think even Dario Saric, I don't think getting a hand up on Chet is worth potentially not being better offensively by just playing DeMar at the 4 or something of that thought process.
I would agree. Next team, I just want to go 2 more here because I think these ones are kind of
This one's bad. Yeah, this one's
Chicago, right?
They have nobody above 7 feet tall.
No, starting 5, I believe it's most likely Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Modest Buzelis, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic. I'm not. This is one of those where I'm like, I'm not really that worried defensively necessarily about this team. Like this is where, again, back to your like, hey, if you just have at this point, you should have at least a little bit, and we're only 4 games into the season, but however many practices preseason in the belt too, like just have a feel of like, in my mind going into this one, just who's your best choice? Like who has looked the best alongside these starters, and that's the way that you should go.
Yeah, 100%.
And the last one I want to do, because this one is very much a size problem, is the Milwaukee Bucks. And this is where we have specifically whatever about the guards, right? But Giannis Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner side by side. This is where you had Mike Brown,
Kuzma
Alex Len, and Kyle Kuzma out there. This is where Mike Brown put Alex Len in the game for 4 minutes of the first half and 4 minutes of the second half, and that was about it. That's a hell no for me. I'm not doing it. I mean, I could see it a little bit, I guess. Whatever. I could talk myself into it, but I'm not doing it. I just am not about it. We talked about Domas being at the 4. I don't think that's the way to go. And your strength has to be offense as much as you want it to be defense. Like you can't be sacrificing your offense for the sake of being a mediocre defense. Like you have to lean into what you do well at some point here. And you should have an ideal matchup on the perimeter with if it is Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent, and Kyle Kuzma at the 1 to 3. Like, just make sure your guards are cooking is essentially what needs to happen in this sort of matchup. But, yeah, I mean, what do you do with Giannis and Miles Turner there? Who the hell is guarding Giannis?
No, this is the exact kind of game where I am. I have to definitely say, like, I'm not an NBA coach, and so I don't have an answer because my answer would be exactly what you just said, and it would probably get you in trouble with fans because you'll be getting dunked on all game, and your fans will be, "What the hell is he doing out there? Giannis is just literally standing and dunking over DeMar DeRozan. Why the hell isn't he throwing a 7-footer out there or whatever?" Like, and you know that would make sense if you're getting killed, but I think I ultimately feel how you feel, and you have to go down swinging at some point. You have to go down trying to lean into some sort of strength. And I think you, again, will be chasing your tail if you're going to try and match Milwaukee height for height because you're just not going to be able to do it. And so this is a matchup where I think you're probably ultimately it's a schedule loss. You're going to get killed, but I would try and lean into guards. And again, try and, just
try and outscore Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Essentially, yeah. Like I really don't know. I don't think it's gonna work, but I think it's the best option you have because you can't even. You mentioned Trey Lyles, like Jake LaRavia. You can't even fake trying to guard Giannis anymore. You know, like it was always the question on this team. Again, even with Keegan Murray, who's guarding LeBron, who's guarding KD, who's guarding Giannis, who's guarding Paul George, who's guarding Kawhi. Like these have perennially been a problem for the Kings. And it's a problem for most NBA teams too. No one can figure out how the hell to guard Giannis, but the Kings really have had nobody that even makes any sort of sense. Not even a Jared Vanderbilt, not even like these guys at the bottom of the bench that you can just throw out there and be different. Like there is no answer for this team. And so ultimately I think you have to try and get weird. And I think that's leaning small. And I think ultimately again, we're not going to go through every game, but looking at the schedule, I think the vibe you can get from us going through these first couple games is they can get through most of the games, but I have it marked about 9 games in. And again, Keegan's meant to miss 10 to 17. Yeah. Their 9th game is against OKC again on November 7th. 10th game, Minnesota. That's obviously a team that has an incredible amount of height. Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels. Then they play Denver. Denver obviously has a ton of height. Cam Johnson now over there and Aaron Gordon, Jokic obviously. Atlanta, they add Porzingis. They have Jalen Johnson. They have a ton of height over there. Then Minnesota again, and then at San Antonio. So it starts to get to that, like the games 10 through 14 and some after that Memphis and then Denver and then Minnesota again. That's kind of where, you start to get into more of the meat of the season, or you start to kind of feel like you're in the rhythm of the season. And if you're 3-7, 3-8 at that point, because you just haven't been able to match up, I don't know, things can easily start to spiral. So I think the overall theme is it feels like maybe they're not as screwed as what you initially feel like when you see the Keegan news, but ultimately they can survive for a little, but the longer this thing goes on, the tougher shit they're going to be in.
100%. They need the guy out there. And when you have 3 matchups pretty early against Denver, OKC, Minnesota, like those teams specifically are going to be, that's going to be a tough ass matchup. for the Kings. That's just a reality of what it is. That was, to your point, already going to be the case whether Keegan was out there or not. So I think that's the reality of it here. And just to kind of put a bow on it, for me, I'm really picking between Nick Clifford and Keon Ellis, depending on the matchup. And I very much hear you with Nick being early in his career. Are you doing that for first game of his career? I'm considering it. And that's what this preseason is for, right? That's what these practices are for. Like, roll him out there against the Lakers, against the Clippers in these preseason games and see what this looks like a little bit. Because you got to try to figure it out. And I don't think there's very many good options. I'm personally not going Dario Saric. Like I said, I'm not going Maxime right now. I'm not really, I mean, maybe Dario will get more consideration than I'm giving him credit for. Maybe Isaac will. But to me, I really think it's Nick or Keon. And you're just asking DeMar to guard up a little bit more here. Like in the Giannis matchup, you just put Domas on Giannis and maybe DeMar is guarding Miles Turner, you know? Like I just
he's
think
not much of a rebounder, I guess.
You go here. Yeah. Like it's just, I'm really going between Keon and Nick. And ideally by 5 games, you know which one works better and roll with it.
Even in the Nick situation, you're not going Nick at the 4 necessarily, right? You're still having DeMar move up, or are you going Nick at the 4?
I would say that like it's typically more DeMar
defensively
at the 4. Yeah, typically more DeMar at the 4, but like you're playing the Lakers and it's Rui and Jared Vanderbilt. Maybe I'm starting DeMar on Rui, you know, for the case of the strength. Or you can like swap those out as need be. But I'm probably putting, if it's a stronger matchup, then I'll go DeMar. If it's a quicker guy, I'd go Nick. You know what I mean? And sometimes the quicker guy happens to be at the 4, but for sake of your question, yes, DeMar moving to the 4, essentially.
Yeah, interesting. No, I kind of definitely start to get some pause when Nick is at the, it's just, again, I don't know how tall he is. He's listed at 6'5". I think he might be, it depends, again, what position you want him to play. Feels like it varies which height you give him. If you think that Nick can play point guard, it feels like people will say, oh, no, he's like 6'5". He's actually not that big. But when you say, oh, no, he can guard 1 through 4, all of a sudden he's now 6'7", and, has a crazy wingspan and all this stuff. So, I just kind of am a little bit worried about what positions he can actually guard. But ultimately, too, and Doug talked about it, I think you might have even specifically asked him on Monday, sometime recently, they switch 1 through 4 so much that ultimately it probably doesn't matter who they put in, because with this situation specifically, they're probably just going to be switching like everything 1 through 4, where maybe before it was a little bit of variance. I think if you're going to have DeMar at the 4, you might as well be willing to switch everything.
For sure. And I think an unsung, I guess, like thing to watch a little that you mentioned earlier is like, is Zach really better defensively this year? Because I do think actually he looked pretty well in these first 2 preseason games, flying around out there. You mentioned the athleticism that he's obviously got. Like, I think there's more there than what we've seen. Now, again, this is not lockdown, but like, can you guard the Rui that we're talking about? Can you guard Kyle Kuzma, Buzelis, Jalen Williams? Like, I don't think the Jalen one's going in his favor, but there is more pressure on what he's going to be able to do here as well. And the other thing I'll throw in is that Doug did say that he's going to lean on the starters here, that, guys are getting rep alongside these other 4 starters. And I think this is where Doug, being a former player, plays in, and guys really appreciate that on the roster. He's going to ask them, hey, who was jiving best with you guys? Right. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Like, figure out what they're most comfortable with, because that's still who you're relying on. As much as it's easy to be somebody else needs to step up in his place. Like, no, the guys that were already there to play alongside him are probably the ones that are really carrying more weight here. You mentioned the Spurs, by the way, and I saw the best nickname ever right before this for their front court. I don't know why Luke Cornett and Victor Wembanyama needed a nickname.
Oh, yeah.
French Vanilla.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Solid. Super solid.
Great nickname.
No notes.
No, as good as it gets. The one other thing I want to mention that's obviously crucial with Keegan here is that he was one of the, maybe not few, but last remaining rookie scale extension eligible guys. And that goes up until October 20th, the start of the regular season, when he is eligible to be extended. Prior to, if a deal was not reached, he would go into restricted free agency in the following offseason. The one thing I want to note that I feel like isn't talked about that much is that Keegan has a want to do this as well. He was close with De'Aaron.
Sure.
He was close with Mike Brown. We've joked that I kind of call him the lone survivor in a way at times. Like that is still a question, not reporting anything, but I just think something that important to keep in mind. But Chris, you kind of have some comparable numbers here for guys that Keegan could relate to. But I guess first, do you feel like this injury affects those negotiations at all?
No, I really don't think they do. Yeah, I mean, I'm not actually super familiar. What's the actual date in which that has to be signed by?
The date I saw for their deadline was the 20th. So that may mean like it's technically the end of the 19th, but it is 1 week from today.
See that? You know what? No, ultimately, I don't think it does. I think maybe if it would have fallen in between of like the first couple weeks of the season where he's still going to be out, but ultimately, I was going to say if it's at the end of the year that he has to make the decision, if he plays well, like I don't think that's going to change. I don't think that's going to. I ultimately think the Kings were going to sign him anyway. I heard you and Frankie talking about it earlier today, and I just feel like ultimately I think the Kings already have their decision made up on all of this, and I don't think some preseason games were going to ultimately decide what they had envisioned for Keegan Murray in the long term. It's not as if this has been a nagging injury for him. It's not as if it's his knee or his ankles or his feet or anything like that. It's a pretty freak accident. I looked at his injury history. It's never been anything too concerning. Last year he kind of dealt with a nagging ankle injury. That hasn't really shown up all too often for him. He's been very, very healthy through his career so far. He's played at least 76 games in all of his seasons. He's obviously going to play 72, maybe 70 this year. I just kind of feel like the Kings should have already had their minds made up in terms of what they were going to do with Keegan. So I can't really see. I'd love to hear the argument for why it would, though, because I just don't really see how it would play a factor.
The only thing I could think of is that like it just lowers. I'd imagine what is currently going on is the same, maybe not the same thing as Jonathan Kuminga, because his side just totally catered to what the Warriors wanted there. But it's probably just arguing over a couple million annually at this point, right? And I'd imagine that both sides want to get a deal done, whether Keegan like loves his situation in Sacramento or not. I don't think players are turning down to upwards of $1 million or $100 million. Sorry. Like on a contract that is hard to turn down. Right. And if we're talking, we'll get to numbers right here, but like 25 million plus annually, for example, over even 20 million annually over 5 years, like that's $100 million right in front of you. I think it's hard for players not to take that. The only thing I would think of injury wise is that like, if this affected the rest of his season somehow, it could mess with his restricted free agency if he did not get a deal done. And then depending on how this year may have went, if the thought was, hey, we're not going to do that because we think Keegan's about to break through and we're banking on restricted free agency, maybe that makes you feel a little bit differently about this. But overall, I don't really think so. It's more so me presenting the other side. I don't think it really messes with much. So they got a week to still figure this out. They also know what he worked on over the offseason. He wasn't here in Sacramento, but they just had, maybe 2 weeks of having him in the building. Like they know the progress that he has made and what they already think he's capable of. I don't think that was changing over the next week, no matter he was out there or not.
Yeah, no,
but if you want to go through some of the numbers, I know you kind of have some of that in front of you, comparable deals. I'm down to do that a little bit here at the end.
Yeah, I mean, this is the funnest exercise that everybody loves to do, player A and player B, and I'll give you player A, and you tell me if you'd rather have player A or player B, and we can talk about the financials of it. So player A has played so far in his career 212 total games, 7 career playoff games. He has averaged exactly 13 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 1.7 of those being offensive. 1.3 assists and shooting splits of 43% from the field, 34 from 3 on 4.9 attempts, and then 80% from the free throw line. So that's 13, 7.5 on 43, 34, 80. The other one has played 233 games, so about 20 more games in the regular season in the same amount of time. 7 playoff games as well. 13.3 points, so 0.3 more points per game. 5.6 rebounds, so 2 less rebounds per game. 1.4 assists, so about the same amount of assists. Shooting splits 45, 37, 81. 37% on 6.3 attempts. So you have about 20 more games from player B, 0.3 more points, 2% from the field better, 3% from three better, but 2 less rebounds a game. Player A or player B?
I'm probably going player B. My real cop-out answer would be it just depends who's the better defender. But because offensively, like, this is identical, but I would favor just the slight percentage boost over the rebounds, for example, of give me 37 from three rather than 33.
Yeah. And all of you at home should know, player A, Jabari Smith Jr., player B, Keegan Murray. Maybe it plays into a factor to your A versus B decision. One is 22 years old. One is 25 years old. Yeah. So one is putting up pretty much the same numbers 3 years earlier in their development with a little bit less percentage if you want to look at it the other way. So Jabari Smith Jr., obviously the same draft class. As a matter of fact, I think a single pick ahead of Keegan Murray. We just went down the numbers. For all intents and purposes, we can call it a wash. Again, if you like the more rebounds per game, some might like the better percentages from the field. It's pretty much a wash between the two. Jabari Smith Jr. signs a 5-year, $122 million extension. It's a little bit strange. It's ultimately $24.4 million annually. I say it's strange because the structure is year one, $23.6 million. Then year two, the deal goes down to 21.7, but then by year 5, it elevates back up to 27.4. I would assume that's some cap gymnastics that have to do with the specifics of the Houston Rockets payment structure. I'm assuming that just allows them to stay under the tax for maybe that second year where they're paying, they have a kind of a log jam of contracts. Bigger point is you're making $24 million per year. And the other exercise I do want to do is go through the extensions that have been signed around the ballpark of what we're talking about for Keegan Murray. And the one thing that sticks out to me is that this past offseason lost Keegan Murray a ton of money, and I have no idea why, and I would love if you can maybe explain. So I'm going back to the 2023 offseason up into this past one. RJ Barrett signed a 4-year, $107 million extension in 2023. That's for $26.75 million annually. Jaden McDaniels in 24 signs a 5-year, $131. That's 26.2. That same offseason in 24, Devin Vassell, 5 for $135. That's 27. Trey Murphy last offseason signed a 4-112. That's 28 mil per season. That same offseason, Jalen Johnson, 5 years, $150. That's $130. Now we get to this past offseason. Explain this to me. So you just heard all of those numbers. How does Jabari Smith Jr. then go for 5-122? That's 24.4. And then the other one that was even in the ballpark, PJ Washington, which I don't necessarily think is in the same conversation of those guys, but he's not far off. 4 years, 88 mil, 22 mil per year. And so the general theme of where I'm getting there is what happens when we go from these guys, Devin Vassell, Trey Murphy, signing $28 million. Jalen Johnson, who I will admit should be getting paid more than Keegan Murray. That team plans for Jalen Johnson to be more involved than what the Kings do for Keegan Murray. But $30 million and then Jabari to get 24. Like, it just definitely seemed like this thing, if you would have asked me in the 24 offseason when McDaniels is getting 26, Devin Vassell getting 27, the next offseason Trey Murphy gets 28. How is Keegan Murray, and I'm sure this is where the difference and the bigger point that I think is maybe happening here is his agent is probably saying, fuck this past offseason. I don't care about $24 million. Jabari Smith's agent is an idiot who didn't get him enough. It looks to me like these past extensions are much more in the 25, 26, 27, 28, and if you really, really believe in me, 30 range. I'm sure that's really what's going on is Scott Perry's just saying 24, 24, 24, 23. Maybe they'll give and 25 is going to be that magic spot. But even then, $25 million is less than RJ Barrett, less than Jaden Daniels, less than Devin Vassell, less than Trey Murphy, and only $1 million above Jabari Smith. Like, I don't know. To me, when I did the exercise, it's very clear to me Jabari Smith Jr. just lost Keegan Murray a ton of money. And I don't know if it has to do with the salary cap or maybe the new CBA, people having a better grasp of or understanding of how to kind of delegate contracts better. But it just seemed glaring to me that this problem is probably Keegan Murray's agent saying, we want more than $24-25 million. And here is exact reasons why.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's probably exactly what's going on, like you mentioned. And, the first thing I'm going to point to is what you mentioned already, the aprons. Like, I would guess that it's just teams getting more familiar with that. You hear conversations of more national guys talking about how these mid-level contracts just aren't in the same range that they used to be, as you just laid out, that it's tougher to even the top end guys, like getting full on max money. People right now are like, I don't think that Trae Young is just a full max. Like, if they can lower that a little bit, a la Jalen Brunson, even though that was a little bit of a unique scenario, then maybe there is just more flexibility for what our team can do. So I do kind of think that the tone of how these negotiations have changed over the last couple of years. And I love that you brought up Jabari, because I've always thought that is like, even you mentioned their season by season or their career numbers, last year's numbers are damn near identical between the two of those guys as well. They are like shockingly similar. And then Jabari gets that extension. But I think there's also a world where it's funny, because of the time of the draft, I certainly didn't think this was the case. Keegan's a better defender than Jabari, and he might have a little bit more, maybe their off the dribble game is like somewhat similar, right? But there's not that much. I think the upside idea of Jabari has started to fade a little bit more over time, and more of just like a 3-and-D with great size, And I think from Keegan's agent perspective, there's also hey, last year, like I didn't really have the cuffs off. Like I was playing a limited role. I was embracing the defensive end. I'm guarding Trae Young and LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Like, and you're asking me to shoot. Like, the 3-point percentage has gone down since. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of that. But through that exercise of the numbers and what we did of him being out and how clearly they need him on this team, I feel like there's going to be an agreement. I think it's not weird for things to go up to the deadline. It's honestly just probably good negotiation from both sides, right? Where nobody really wants to budge, and we're just going to wait and see, like, okay, who is going to move a little bit here? And maybe neither side really is. Well, I guess one side would have to, and either way. But maybe there's a meeting in the middle a little bit. But they clearly need Keegan, and I just think that, assuming we are in that 24 to 26 range, I just don't see how Keegan could turn that down. It's too much money on the table. And, modern NBA, hey, you don't want to be here in 2 years, so you don't want to be here, you're going to end up somewhere else. Like, and I guess I keep mentioning that just because I'm curious, and I feel like it's under discussed less than, hey, Keegan doesn't want to be here. Not what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, I think it is the nature of how the league has changed over the last couple of years. I know the hard caps weren't implemented over these last couple of years, not hard caps, the aprons, but they like are starting to become more aware of what the team building looks like idealized under those caps. And I just kind of feel like that's what's going on here. But it's a great point, because like that Trey Murphy deal, I remember when that came out, everybody's like, damn, this is what they're going to have to pay Keegan. And yeah, you're probably right. That is really funny to think of Keegan's agent being like, fucking Jabari, man.
This guy really, I mean, because it makes no sense. Like, you look at the trend of it, and it's all like, I mean, it's just
There's
crazy.
No player
like,
option either.
It doesn't make any sense. And again, like, the structure of his deal, even to go down as low as $21 million per year. I know, again, it escalates as high as 27, but it's just a really, really strange deal. And if you're Keegan Murray's agent, again, maybe you're pointing more towards but it still caps out at 27 mil. And so, again, maybe that's the number they're shooting for. I don't know. And I think maybe it's a conversation we can have when/if he actually signs it. But I can understand from the Kings' perspective of this thing, like, maybe not being willing to talk about the higher 20s of the per year situation, because we there still is the question of I don't know what Keegan Murray is long term. I don't know if he is just like a fourth or fifth option. I can't necessarily, with how the aprons are set up, I can't afford to pay a guy who's going to be our fifth or sixth highest scoring player and maybe a top 2 or 3 defensive option for us. I can't pay him our third or fourth highest paid contract because it just doesn't make sense from a team building perspective. So I don't know. Like it's a pretty fascinating negotiation on both sides of things, and I kind of think it's going to be one of those where both sides feel like they lose.
Yeah, he is one of the few remaining players still out there. Like Jaden Ivey's the other big one I think of.
He's
but
another
Keegan's
big question too.
One of the few guys that it's like, okay, clearly though, this team does fit. Like they need Keegan. And I think that Keegan plays an important role on this team. He's getting the opportunity to spread his wings a little bit. I mean, still have to see that play out, but that was definitely the idea. I do think we saw him be aggressive in preseason. Doug, hey, I want you to take 10 threes, which is very much same tone as I want the team to take 50 free threes last year. That's just aim high, essentially, more than anything. But yeah, I keep thinking, coming back to that, the Kings would need this guy. And he's one of their few upside pieces still there for whatever you think that may be, but very few guys. I mean, there's nobody else comparable to Keegan. Like if you're super optimistic on Devin Carter still, I guess throw him in there. I don't think it's the same. Keon does not have the ceiling of Keegan Murray. It's not even particularly close in my mind. So I just think the Kings need him. And from Keegan's perspective, it's really hard when you get offered over $100 million, 120, whatever we're talking about. Like, I find it hard to imagine saying no to that, considering anything could happen throughout the course of this year. You're already missing the beginning portion of it. What if, you do have an ankle thing after you come back 20 games into the year and all of a sudden you played 30 games this year? Like your restricted free agency is looking real tough. And we just saw how restricted free agency played out for some of these other guys, albeit in a very, very limited market. The teams that have space next year are not going to be very good. And I don't know that Keegan is necessarily like, if you're a younger team, do the Brooklyn Nets want Keegan Murray? I don't think so. They didn't want Jonathan Kuminga. So I just think in my mind, I would guess that something happens probably around that Jabari number.
Well, and that's again where I would bring up the conversation I just had, where if I'm the Kings, I just don't know. Like we don't know where Keegan Murray is, and that's where. What does that mean? If you're saying, if you are, Brenden, you just said like Keegan Murray hits open free agency, or to an extent open free agency, obviously restricted free agency. Okay, hit the open, for lack of a better term, open market. What's your value? I don't think Keegan Murray is going to get that $25 million that he would get as an extension. And so I don't know what the Kings should do about that. It's kind of a classic problem that it feels like this team is in a lot, where your value to this team might not necessarily be what the value is league wide. And again, I'm not saying he's going to be as big of a pariah as Zach LaVine, but I think that's how you get into contracts like Zach LaVine's contract, where, hey, we think you can be our number one option. Well, that's great for your current situation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's always going to be, even in the same organization 3 years from now, let alone what organization you could possibly be in moving forward. So I don't know. Like I just haven't seen enough of Keegan, which is crazy because again, he's played all of these games, but he's just been in so many different situations. To your point that you brought up before, he's been asked to do such a wide variety of things that have also affected how he's able to do other things, that I just don't know how you fairly pay him for what you think he's going to be in the next step of his career, when it's not about trying to figure out what he is. It's more about maximizing the guy that you've been test casing these past 5 years. And if you still don't have an answer, I don't know. It's just, it's mind boggling. And I'm glad I don't have to make the decision, but to me, it's just a lot tougher of a decision than maybe what it looks like on the surface.
I would agree. I think, your point of, maybe go make them prove it. Like, hey, you think you're worth that much? Go show me another team that's going to be willing to do that for you in restricted free agency, and then we'll match it, Right. Or maybe there's, I mean, from his perspective, they play out the year and say he misses some games and they clearly miss him. Maybe that ups Keegan's leverage come restricted free agency of like, hey, you need me on this team. Like, we all saw how that went. And hey,
Jonathan, where does Jonathan
come?
Kuminga play into all this
Right.
as well? I mean, we don't know, obviously he can't be traded until January 15th. We don't know truly how he feels about being traded midseason. I know reports already came that he doesn't want to be traded midseason, but if it's in a situation where the Kings have, again, already made up their minds, they haven't extended Keegan Murray to that rookie extension by then, maybe they say, hey, like, we already have Keegan out the door and we're actually already planning on who's going to come replace him, and we're just going to trade Keegan Murray for what we can get, and Jonathan Kuminga is actually going to be our forward of the future. I don't know. I literally don't know. I'm just speculating, but I think that is, frankly, like a top 3 option right now that I would see playing out.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna find out over this next week. They got 1 week to make a decision here, and obviously they're not going to see him on the floor any longer as well. If he doesn't sign a contract, I'd be, again, if I'm on Keegan's side and I'm dealing with this injury, I'm taking the 6 weeks. Like, sorry, I'm taking my time. If I do not have a deal locked in, then I'm not risking it. And that might be something the Kings want to consider here a little bit as well. Like, again, take this year for what you will, but it all sort of factors in, and that's what makes this just really unfortunate timing for Keegan to have this torn ligament in his thumb, going to be out for a little while. It is in his left for what it's worth. He's a lefty, shoots with his right. So
he is dominant left though. Dominant left hand, just doesn't shoot lefty.
Yeah, they have a couple of those, right? I know Davion was like that. I want to say
I know LeBron is famously like that, but I don't know.
LeBron is like
else,
that. I forget who else, but they had somebody else on the team last year as well. But anyways, we will all see how it plays out. I think that it's going to be curious to see them have this little bit of a test period in a way. It's never a good time for a player to go down, but it could be worse for sure. At least you have a little bit of preseason and training camp here to sort of figure it out. And it's also the first real hiccup that Doug has had to deal with. I mean, there were things last year, but now being the full-time guy, definitely a thing that he's got to figure out here as well. So a lot for them to try and digest here as we got about a week left before the season is fully underway, and they already have their first little hiccup. But we will see how it plays out. Do you have any? I don't have any overtime planned for today. I think that we kind of did enough. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
The only thing I have written down that kind of pertains to what we've talked about from the Blazer game the other night is just in general to like the non-Sabonis rebounding. I mentioned in the third quarter in my notes, non-Sabonis rebounding is a long-term problem. Like there was just specifically in that Blazer game, tons of offensive rebounds allowed by that second unit. It's been a problem, frankly, ever since Sabonis walked in the building, but especially with Keegan Murray out. Keegan's really been the only other person that's attempted to rebound with Sabonis on the floor. Obviously, Sabonis is going to be on the floor a lot this season, maybe more so than we've ever seen, but the rebounding by people who are not named Domantas Sabonis is going to be abysmal, and it's going to be a problem. So I don't know how they address it, but with Keegan being out, I think it somehow got worse.
Yeah, no, Keegan, that was one of his big steps last year for sure. Maybe that's where Isaac Jones, Dario Saric plays into all this, like I wonder if, we could see Zach be more active on the glass this year, for example. So yeah, I mean, definitely good noted, and just another thing that it hurts to miss Keegan for. So we will see how it all plays out here. They got 2 more preseason games, Wednesday and Friday, one at home, one on the road. Clippers, Lakers. I could have that order wrong. I do. It's Lakers home and Clippers on the road. So we will see how that plays out. I'm again questioning if I got that backwards. Whatever. It's Lakers and Clippers.
It's Clippers home, Lakers road.
Thank you.
Wednesday, Friday.
I'm going to LA on Friday too, and I don't even know what the hell's going on.
Wow, that's crazy.
So yeah, we will see how this all plays out, and we will continue to update you here on the Kings Pulse podcast.
Yes, sir.
Be sure, if you're on the audio side, to subscribe to the YouTube, get a look at any sort of clips that we're playing, the visual to go with it, and all of that. Do more of that in the future. If you're on YouTube, audio side, every listening platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be that you listen to, Kings Pulse podcast on there. Subscribe to stay up to date and keep your finger on the pulse of the Sacramento Kings. So for myself, Brenden Nunes, and Chris Watkins, appreciate everybody listening, and you'll hear from us again a little bit later.